Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. We were up late watching the joint address to Congress that took place. Marianne Williamson is back in the chair with me to react. Nice to see you, Marianne. Lots to discuss.
See you too, thank you. Robby and I will embody the divergent views that Americans had about the president's speech. So let's hear what Robby has to say. What's on your radar, Robby?
Happy to tell you. President Donald Trump delivered electrifying and entertaining remarks last night to a joint session of Congress in which he laid out his policy vision for the next 4 years. Now, far from running away from the promises he made to his voters and the American people at large, Trump promised to continue working toward world peace vis-a-vis Ukraine, toward a stronger economy, and toward an America First policy of ending pointless and unpopular spending on foreign aid projects. Indeed, the highlight of the night was certainly Trump rattling off a long list of foreign aid recipients uncovered by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Let's watch.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million.
If the entire speech had just been Trump getting that list of unnecessary foreign payments, I think it would have been just fine. Trump also vowed to cut regulation, of course, and he touted his executive order requiring that for every regulation added to the federal code, 10 must be deleted. Be still my beating heart. He also said federal workers would return to work in person or be fired. He said the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over. He also declared, quote, "I've stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America." And of course, Trump bragged about ending DEI. All of these initiatives, ending DEI, repealing pointless business-killing regulations, and ending federal funding for various foreign aid schemes, are extremely popular with the American people. Maybe the Democrats aren't aware of that because they greeted Trump's message with icy silence at best. Now, some of them heckled and interrupted him. Here was Democratic Representative Al Green being removed from the chamber after interrupting Trump's speech.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
I did not care for him pointing his cane at people, but your mileage may vary. Now, we'll be discussing the Democratic response to Trump later on Rising, but spoiler alert, I was not very impressed by it. This is not a party that has any idea right now on how to counter Trump at all. It's because they don't appreciate that his message is, as I just said, popular, that ordinary Americans feel taken advantage of by a federal government that cares more about sending billions of dollars to Ukraine than repairing vital American infrastructure, or ending job-killing regulations, or eliminating redundancies in the federal bureaucracy, or making it easier for American families to flourish. That the people gave Trump a mandate to reform the government's relationship with the governed, us, to make federal power more accountable to the people. But if the Democrats are completely lost, the Republicans, to be fair, are at least kinda, sorta, a little bit lost. That's because even though they cheered Trump when he called out reckless government spending on those stupid foreign aid projects, well, here's the thing. Most of them voted to spend that money in the first place. And they haven't voted for new legislation to cancel the spending. They act like they're on board with Trump and with Elon, but unless they pass legislation to actually enact the cuts, then it's just that, an act. Republicans, unfortunately, talk a good game when they're out of power, but when it comes to actually roll up their sleeves and cut government, they fail to do it every time. Republican Representative Thomas Massie, one of a small handful of principled limited government conservatives, called out his own party, writing on X, Congress just stood up and applauded DOGE for exposing wasteful and fraudulent programs that Congress itself funded and plans to fund in the coming CR. That's exactly the problem. Now is the time, Republicans. I appreciate you all clapping like trained seals when Trump speaks, but if you really mean it, now is the time to get to work. And so, as I said, Marianne, I think the best part of the speech was him just going through all of those programs that the American people do not support to the extent they even knew they were going on. We Americans want an America First policy, not all of this reckless spending all over in the world. That's what I believe, at least. I think public opinion is with me. And the Republicans are all clapping, oh yes, let's cut this spending. Like, you guys, you have done nothing to control this whatsoever, which is why it's been outsourced to a private citizen, Elon, to identify, because you failed. So I hope they blow me away, change my mind, actually get rid of that kind of spending. But they have failed to act, but here we are.
The president's quip about sedentary migrants was pretty funny. I'll give you that one. But in general, the president's speech was dark, it was menacing, and it was filled with lies. The two that are the most important in my mind have to do with Social Security and have to do with Canada. First of all, the president knows that everything he said about Social Security was a lie. All of those facts have been debunked about how they're sending all these checks to people who are 120 or 135 years old. The president must know these are lies, but the American people need to know that there's a reason for these lies. What they are doing is that they are buttering people up to feel like it's a terrible program that's doing terrible things. Now, 69 million people in this country receive a Social Security check every single month. And in its 80 years of existence, they have never missed sending out those checks. There are people who can eat because of those Social Security checks. There are people who can live lives of a minimum level of dignity. Many of them absolutely panicked listening to the president last night. So American people know what's really going on here. He knew he was lying. But Musk has said he wants to cut out 12% of the workforce. So the president, it's a bad cop, good cop thing. The president comes on to say, oh, it doesn't work. It's a terrible program. It's a mess. So then what can happen is Musk can come in, get rid of 12% of the workforce. The former head of the Social Security Department says this could completely break down the entire infrastructure and those checks could stop being sent out. This is a way to start privatizing Social Security, and it's terrible. Also, I'm sorry, and then we'll talk about Canada.
Let me just respond to that real quickly.
Okay.
Privatizing it is not getting rid of it. It would be making it be run more efficiently, like Musk has done with many of his companies, including X, where he reduced the workforce by 80% and can still deliver the same product. If they can do that with Social Security, that's savings they can pass on to you. It's not to give people smaller and smaller checks, but to recognize that this system will go broke, it will go insolvent. My generation, people younger, are paying into it and are not going to get a dime out of it unless it's fixed.
Okay.
And you should. I don't think it's right to view it as a government jobs program.
First of all, it is working. And the way to remedy any problem we would have with the future is simply to remove the cap, so that people be paying into it at a slightly higher level of income. So Social Security is not a mess. That's the point. They're creating the idea. It's like our parklands. It's not a mess. Consumer protection, it's not a mess. What they're doing is making you feel that it's a mess so that Musk can get rid of all these things.
Make people's paychecks smaller.
Pardon?
That's what Democrats are going to campaign on?
No, I'm not saying Democrats are going to campaign on anything. I'm saying right now that the program is working.
Raise the cap so that more of your paycheck every year goes into this government entitlement program.
You know, maybe because you're young, you're not thinking about the 69 million.
I'm not.
You can't even imagine, nor can Musk imagine, what it feels like to be an older American. Your usefulness to the economy is greatly diminished. Your body is beginning to break down. And those Social Security checks make all the difference in the world, whether you can eat, whether you can make sure that you will not be one of those 700,000 homeless people living on the streets. This man is at this point, and this is emotional abuse as well as economic. Excuse me?
What about younger people who can't afford to start families and purchase homes?
Social Security is not the problem there. Those Social Security checks being given to your grandparents is not the reason why you're having a problem with the economy. None of these things, all the things you were talking about in your talk about how it's so great that we're getting rid of that money so it can go to the people. It's not to go to the people. It's for tax cuts for billionaires. And attacking Canada, one of the lies is about fentanyl. Let's be very clear. 0.02% of the fentanyl that comes into this country is from Canada. At this point, there are experts who say that more drugs and illegal firearms, by the way, are going from the United States into Canada than anything like that coming from Canada into us. What they are trying to do is to crush the economy of Canada so that Canada will be in such a desperate state as to want to be a 51st state. Canada doesn't like it, and no American should like it. We talk about our sovereignty. Well, they have sovereignty too. And these imperialistic threats and these tariffs, it is terrible what the president is doing. I didn't find it electrifying. I found it kind of horrifying, actually.
Well, tell us what you think, and we will continue reacting to the speech. We've got Stephen Olikara joining us in a minute to discuss the Democratic response and whether he thought that was effective. More Rising right after this. It was a presidential address unlike any other. President Trump was his best self at the joint session of Congress address on Tuesday. Democrats also revealed their own disarray, perhaps. It began, obviously, with Democrats abstaining from joining the president's procession down the chamber floor as Trump walked in.
Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury from New Mexico, among others in the room, held up signs that read, "This is not normal." Then, Texas Democrat Al Green heckled the president, yelling out, "You don't have a mandate," an outburst that prompted Vice President J.D. Vance to motion the sergeant-at-arms to remove Green. Several Democrats, including Representatives Jasmine Crockett, Jamie Raskin, and Maxwell Frost, trickled out of the chamber during longest presidential address in history. Those who stayed held up signs that read, "False," "Musk steals," "Save Medicare," and "Protect veterans." Trump responded. Let's listen.
This is my fifth such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do.
Joining us now to drill down into the Democrats' reaction is former Democratic Senate candidate for Wisconsin, Stephen Olikara. Welcome back to Rising, Stephen. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. Thanks for having me.
Of course, great to get your reaction to what we heard last night, particularly the Democrats. Do you think the kinds of behavior that Al Green involved himself in, those little signs that got held up. Now, I don't actually think any of this matters. I'm not sure normal people are really paying attention so much to the State of the Union or the joint address or whatever we're calling it. But have the Dems found a good way to oppose or resist Trump in terms of the kind of theatrics we saw last night?
Among the Democratic leadership, no. I mean, if the face of your party can't be Al Green, he tried to attract attention to himself last night. And then previous to that, if you remember the protests outside the Department of Treasury, for example, Chuck Schumer taking front stage, that's not who you want as the face of your party. Now, I do think the Democrats made a really smart decision in selecting Senator Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan to provide the Democratic response. And she had, I think, a really smart, thoughtful message. She spoke to economic issues, pocketbook issues that I think really impact the majority of Americans right now, especially as the cost of many goods, including eggs and other goods, are going through the roof. You see that kind of message not gaining the kind of oxygen that it requires. It's not being talked about too much today because of people like Al Green. So no, I don't think him standing up and getting removed helped. I don't think the bingo paddles helped at all. I think it looks weak, it looks inept, and it looks disorganized. And I think Democrats at the leadership level need to just step back. They have been humbled over the last few months and let the next generation rise up.
I don't understand what's wrong with a sign that says protect Medicare. You're talking about $800 billion worth of Medicare cuts. What's wrong with politely holding up a sign that says don't steal from Medicare? What's wrong with that? I don't understand. I don't know why Democrats are somehow apologizing for that. Or a sign that says protect veterans. When you have so many veterans who have been working at these agencies, doing a good job, serving their country, being summarily removed like that, I don't think that this is a moment. I don't quite understand why Democrats would be apologizing for what we're doing or what we're not doing right now when really the abuses are coming from the other side.
I agree that Democrats should not be apologizing for those policy positions. I think more what I'm pointing to is the way in which they're doing it. I think there is a way to light up Trump's speech. There is a lot that he said that's not only wrong and not morally right, but also unconstitutional. You know, he spoke to, for example, what DOGE is doing to unconstitutionally stop federal spending that Congress has authorized right now. And the conservative Supreme Court this morning agrees with that position in their newly released ruling about saying that the Trump administration does need to spend that money from USAID. And so the Congress, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should not have been applauding a lot of that speech. And I agree with you, Marianne, that a lot of those positions, standing up for veterans, many of whom are losing their jobs in the federal government right now, standing up for programs like Medicare, are not only morally important positions, but they're ones that are supported by the majority of the American people. And so I think it's smart to stand up for those issues. However, doing so with a bingo paddle, I think just comes across as not forceful. It sounds like you're not in control of the message. And I think that, yes, Democrats need to be more coordinated around some of the politically and publicly popular positions they have, but do so in a way that's not so disruptive. Like, there is a party right now of disruption that's called the Republican Party. We need a party of construction, and that needs to be the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I agree with you that, and with Marianne, that, you know, focusing on cuts to these programs, these entitlements, while I support them, I don't know how politically popular it is, and that's a good strategy for Democrats. What about their failure? They're taking a lot of flack, and I couldn't see exactly in the room at all times, so I don't know if anyone did cheer or what exactly happened, but I know there was a lot of conservative criticism for the perception, at least, that there was not, that it was so partisan that the Democrats wouldn't applaud things that ought to have been bipartisan, like just recognizing tremendous people in the room, like the young kid who was trying to overcome cancer, and we had a little special moment for him. Other moments that could have been, you know, rah-rah unity that the Democrats didn't seem to participate, according to conservatives.
Yeah, there's that moment with the 13-year-old getting a badge from the Secret Service. Yes, you can applaud that. Talking with many of my liberal friends live when that moment happened, that's something that did pull at the heartstrings. It's a heartfelt moment. It's one that you can applaud. Here's the political strategy: if you want your political message to gain more steam, if you're a Democrat and you are criticizing the Trump administration, you have to also demonstrate that your comments are not nakedly partisan or reflectively partisan. And you do that, you accomplish that by demonstrating that you have an open mind, that you have an independent, critical thinking mind to applaud the Trump administration or the speech when he does things that you might agree with, or things that are just purely nonpartisan, like that moment with the Secret Service, and then forcefully oppose him when you disagree with what he's saying. I think loyal Rising viewers know that I've been more than fair to the President Trump and the incoming administration. I've been calling balls and strikes with an independent mind, and I've heavily criticized Democrats for actually helping to create this horrible political moment we're in right now. And so because of that, when I criticize the Trump administration, you know that I'm doing so from my heart, not just because I got some DNC talking points. And so, yes, I do think the smart thing last night would have been to applaud a couple moments strategically and ones that you, in your heart you agree with, and also stand up for some moments that are purely nonpartisan as well.
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing is that had I been a congressperson in that room, absolutely I would have stood up and clapped for that little boy whose story was very touching. But we as Democrats need to make the point very, very clear. The president was talking about how he wants to take on childhood cancer, while at the same time they are firing the people who are actually doing research on childhood cancer. He's talking about wanting to get rid of chronic disease among children, and at the same time, drill, baby, drill, actually exacerbates that. So once again, there's more going on here than just the details of performance. So once again, yes, I would have applauded that child. It's not his fault, the incredible menacing hypocrisy of our president. But at the same time, I think especially when we speak in public, we should make clear what the deeper story is so the American people know why Democrats are upset.
Exactly. And you're right to point out this drill, baby, drill part of the speech. I feel like that also is not getting enough discussion today. Trump's climate agenda was absolutely disastrous last night. It's something that's going to harm and ultimately kill a number of people because of asthma, respiratory issues that people will be getting as a result of this policy. And he said something that was just clearly not true when he talks about the climate agreements costing trillions of dollars. That's just not true, according to the same study that I think he was trying to cite with that. And so I think the environment should be an issue on the discussion right now, and it's something that Democrats should be standing up for because the majority of Americans do want to take climate action and do want to take environmental action more generally. You know, the Trump non-position of we want the best water and the best air is not a policy position, doesn't really mean much. And so, yes, we need to be talking more about the environment and so many more issues that the American people agree on right now. I think if there's one message that Democrats could highlight right now that could potentially cut through, given the recent Supreme Court ruling, is just to highlight that a lot of what the Trump administration is doing right now is unconstitutional. And it's something that conservative constitutionalists like Ted Cruz and others, Mike Lee, for example, should be outraged about, because if you don't have a constitution, you don't have the rule of law, you don't really have a country, and we are teetering right on the edge of losing a constitutional republic. So I think it's really important that Democrats stand up for that and the popular issues that a number of them already support.
Stephen Olikara, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see you both. Thank you.
It appears another major media company will bend the knee to President Donald Trump. Media reporter Oliver Darcy wrote for his status newsletter in its sources telling him that CBS News and 60 Minutes heads are facing corporate pressure to cave to the Trump lawsuits. Now, in his newsletter, Darcy recounts a meeting between three high-level people in October. That included Jeff Shell, in line to become the president of Paramount Global after its merger with Skydance Media's complete, CBS News chief Wendy McMahon, and 60 Minutes boss Bill Owens. During that meeting, people familiar told Darcy that Shell asked McMahon and Owens to release the transcript of 60 Minutes' interview with Kamala Harris. Trump had sued 60 Minutes and accused them of election interference after they edited an answer that Harris gave on Israel and Gaza.
Darcy continues writing, while McMahon and Owens ultimately persuaded Shell that yielding to political pressure would be a poor move, they were left troubled by the meddling, according to people briefed on the situation. They took some solace in the fact that he hadn't forced the issue further, but that relief was short-lived.
Since then, people briefed on the matter tell Darcy that the pressure has escalated. Shell has a partner, Paramount boss Sherry Redstone, in these alleged initiatives. In fact, the New York Times reported Redstone wants to resolve the issue. Ms. Redstone's carefully written statement did not mention Paramount's deal with Skydance, but it did underscore the fact that a pending multi-billion-dollar lawsuit from the president made it difficult for Paramount to do business. She also said that she was removing herself from day-to-day discussions about the lawsuit. Now, back in January, CBS staffers were outraged at the idea of 60 Minutes settling with Trump.
Per Darcy, McMahon and Owens believed that an admission of wrongdoing and settlement would betray their newsroom's principles. If CBS caves, it won't be the first media company to do so. Trump had sued ABC News after anchor George Stephanopoulos said that the president had been found civilly liable for rape, when in fact Trump had been found liable for sexual assault and defamation of E. Jean Carroll. ABC agreed to pay $15 million to Trump's presidential library.
Meta also paid Trump $25 million right after the inauguration to settle a censorship lawsuit. President Donald Trump accused Meta of wrongfully censoring him right after January 6th. Even X, which Elon Musk now owns, paid Trump $10 million in February to settle a different lawsuit. And Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos announced earlier this month that his paper would no longer publish opinion pieces that argued against free markets and individual liberties, or at least that the editorial page would have a pro-free markets and pro-civil liberties stance. So does Paramount Global just want to make doing business easier, or are they trying to appease the president? That is the question. I think they are trying to appease Trump because they don't want to get bogged down in this very expensive lawsuit. Look, I've made my position on this very clear. I don't think suing media outlets that you disagree with or that are mean to you or say wrong things is a good use of Trump's time. I'm generally against, I'm a free speech absolutist. I would actually remove libel laws entirely if I had my way, so suing over speech is whiny to me. However, there's no doubt in my mind that CBS did, I don't know whether they did it intentionally or not, but they did edit that interview with Kamala Harris in a way that I thought made her terrible answer on Israel seem maybe a little less bad, or less awkward, or that she had less of nothing to say. So I agree with the criticism. I just don't think they should be sued over it.
Well, I know a lot on a personal level about how unethical the press can be, the way they edit and so forth, and say things that aren't quite the way they are. At the same time, what's going on here is terrible for the free press. First of all legal experts, practically, all that I've read, have been pretty clear that the president would have lost these cases. Mm-hmm. This is the press caving. When Sherry Redstone said that, it's because she doesn't want to be bogged down in that in terms of trying to sell her company. For CBS to do this, for ABC to do this, is absolutely terrible. It's basically an indirect bribe. It's basically saying to the president, don't hit me, okay, we'll be nice. If that's what happens in this country, that every time he threatens somebody, even if it's completely wrong on his part, everybody just caves and acquiesces, then I fear for my country.
Well, he's wrong. On the legal merits, I agree with you. I don't think the lawsuits would succeed. I am for free speech, even for speech that is wrong, dangerous, or described as dangerous. All that. I'm for speech, so I'm not on board with the lawsuits. George Stephanopoulos was wrong to describe what he was convicted of that way, and CBS was very wrong, in my view, to edit Kamala's response that made it look not as embarrassing for her. But should he be sued over it? No. The broader story of the media, falling in line behind Donald Trump more than before, being afraid of him. Right. I just hope this balances their coverage a little bit, but I don't think they should be forced to do it because Trump is being mean to them. Well,
a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit, is an issue. I think a public apology would have been absolutely reasonable. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've had that kind of thing done to me enough that I understand how wrong it is. This is a matter of a diminishment of journalistic ethics, but the larger issue to me is the president making threats against the press.
And you've seen firsthand how, as you're saying, how biased the mainstream media, the purveyors of truth, can be, how difficult, how dismissive, how shutting down and out of alternate perspectives they are.
But this isn't going to make them be any less unethical towards a Marianne Williamson, because they know that I couldn't sue them for millions of dollars. Right. So that's what's wrong here. It's the overreach on the part of the president and the very inappropriate heavy-handedness of the president towards the press, and the press not standing up for its principles, not standing up for its freedom. If CBS and ABC are going to cave, somebody's got to hold the line here for against the willingness of this president to just bully whomever, whatever. Even, remember, this is a president who has called the press the enemy of the people. This is a standard authoritarian technique.
Well,
once again, I know how bad they can be. I do. But calling them the enemy of the people is contrary to our First Amendment, contrary to a bulwark of freedom in this country. What? Tell me, you're rolling your eyes at that one.
No.
Calling them the end of the people is not a problem for you?
They have really screwed things up. They have done a really bad job, the mainstream media, in my lifetime, of holding the powerful to account, of promoting alternative, allowing for enough healthy debate for us not to get hoodwinked by propaganda of our government in both directions. Think about their tremendous failure during the run-up to the Iraq War. to properly guard against a war based on a
I
total
agree with
sham
you
and a
entirely
lie.
on that.
They're shutting more recently. They're shutting down of more dissident COVID subjects. Now looks totally humiliatingly they're talking about that conspiracy theory that it's a lab leak, and they encouraged censorship. They empowered censorship of those topics. So they've really done a bad job. What I say, they're the enemy of the people. No, I guess not. That's not how I would say it. But
They're just unethical because they are profit-driven. This is what happens when there stops being a firewall between profit and news. It's an ethics issue. It's a capitalism run amok issue. It's profit as bottom line issue. It is not an issue that should be shut down by the President of the United States using authoritarian tropes.
What is the other? I mean, they're not doing it. I mean, businesses are seeking profits. Yes, we want to use the incentive to seek profits does not always, in every case, create social good. I agree with you on that. We want it to create social good, and sometimes, trying to create a product that people want and want to pay for can align with the social good. It does in terms of people grow food and then they sell it to you and then you buy it, and then that's the capitalism, and that's a good thing, rather than the government being responsible for deciding who gets what or what it should cost, or you wait in long lines for it. In every country that does that comes to a horrific, ruinous economic end.
This is an age difference between you and me. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when in a newspaper, the elevator that took you to the news floor couldn't take you to the marketing floor. They were kept so separate, and that's the way it should be. This is why Americans too often do not trust the legacy media, which is why we're here, because we're trying to tell it the way we see it.
All right. Well, I do have more thoughts on that, because even despite when I work for media corporations as I do now, I feel no pressure from advertisers or anything of that. I don't even know who the advertisers are.
I assure you that Anderson Cooper does.
Maybe he does.
I assure you that those who are selling multi-million-dollar contracts having to do with pharmaceutical companies and so forth, they are feeling pressure and they're responding.
If viewers don't like what I'm saying, it's because I'm just a crazy person. It's because if the viewers don't like what I'm saying, it's because
your viewers
I'm just a crazy person.
Your viewers do. I'm the one to take the heat from your viewers, but
Well, we appreciate you getting into the fire. And
I appreciate you too. You're giving me room. Thank you.
Lots more to talk about today on Rising. Please stay with us. Here's an exciting new segment. Marianne, what is in your memo today?
I have a few words to say. I think a lot of Americans are starting to ask themselves, what the hell is going on around here? And well, they should. There has never been in the history of our country a direct assault on our government like this. It isn't a military assault by land or air or sea. It's a political and economic assault by a small group of people who, for deeply nefarious purposes, are gutting the U.S. government. President Bill Clinton cut the federal workforce by hundreds of thousands of people through a responsible, gradual, and deliberative process. Elon Musk and DOGE, however, are simply, with no knowledge of how government works or even what it does, taking a hammer to our federal agencies. They are causing all manner of trauma to our civil servants, which, according to their ally Russ Vought at the Office of Management and Budget, is precisely their intent. Weather forecasting is being stymied, which will drastically diminish the capacity of local governments to serve their communities. Public lands are being sapped of the professionals who cared for them, all the easier to allow bad actors to sell off our precious national resources. In Sudan and Ethiopia, warehouses full of food cannot reach 150,000 starving mothers and children because DOGE stopped the process. It's hard to fathom how one individual so wealthy that he could feed millions of starving people is instead bragging about withholding all that food from those who need it in order to survive. Though Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that food should go out, and now the Supreme Court does, as part of this life-saving waiver, even Rubio apparently has no power over the unvetted, unelected, and unscrupulous Elon Musk. 12% of the Social Security workforce is slated to be fired as well, which will imperil the delivery of Social Security checks to millions of people who rely on those checks for food to eat and a bare minimum of dignity. The Trump administration has also canceled thousands of contracts that funded malaria prevention, polio vaccine initiatives, tuberculosis treatments, Ebola surveillance, and hospitals and refugee camps. We are dismantling a vast humanitarian network that has saved millions of lives and that every American should feel proud of. And my God, I ask you, for what? What is the question? That is the question we need to ask ourselves. And in no universe does it make sense to say, so we can cut out the fat. Musk and his cronies aren't just cutting out the fat. They're cutting into the bone marrow. They aren't repairing a broken system. They are destroying it, and they know it. Mr. Musk and his gang of computer techies are not responsible servants of the public good. They are destructive, cruel, and dangerous purveyors of whatever plot they've got going. Millions of people at this point are clearly concerned, convinced we're experiencing a coup, awake to the techno-billionaire-sponsored takeover that seeks to replace our democracy with a barely disguised soft dictatorship. People do see this. Some say, at this point, there's nothing we can do. I've talked to some who are planning to move to Costa Rica, to Canada, to Portugal, or elsewhere. And many are simply going about their lives, living as they did before, but in a state of deep and quiet panic, with an inestimable sorrow and prayer that somehow this will reverse itself. I think it will. Americans are often distracted by shallow things, but we're not stupid. We can be slow to wake up to a problem, but then we're ready to deal with it magnificently once we do. What I see is a nation in process. I see the wheels spinning. I see a vast inchoate intelligence beginning to emerge among us. It's forging within us a new Americanism, the kind of appreciation you can feel for something only when you realize you're at risk of losing it. And from this will emerge a new America. Yes, Elon Musk is rich beyond imagining, but that doesn't make him all-knowing. He knows engineering, he knows cars, he knows rockets, he knows how to build things, and he knows how to destroy things, but he doesn't know us.
So you describe the process happening as a coup. I think the conservative response to that would be, no, the coup has taken place over the last 100 years of giving power processes that should have been decided and resolved in the common square through democratic norms, of shifting that to a permanent federal bureaucracy that makes policy independent of which party's in power, independent of who you vote for, the bipartisan foreign policy consensus actually being operated by the defense industry and lobbyists and
we agree
generals.
on the military industrial
That's what
complex.
we do, and I hope Elon Musk gets to defense. We've heard rumors that there's going to be, defense is going to get DOGE too, and I'm going to be all for it, because again, conservatives say that was the coup. This is the unwinding of the coup,
So
of now giving Trump and the people, we voted for Trump, and he is relying on the advice of outside parties to shrink the government back to its core mission as envisioned in our founding.
It was Bill
We would not
Clinton-
say that that's a coup. We would say that's democratic.
Democratic
We're
President
making it
Bill
democratic.
Clinton got rid of 450,000
And I like him for
So
it.
this has not been a coup on the part of Democrats. When government becomes bloated, then it is absolutely reasonable for any president of either party to say, we're pulling this back in a deliberative process, as we've discussed about. I don't see Elon Musk as someone we should necessarily consider the outside expert when he knows nothing about government. He said to his techie gang here, if you see a regulation that sounds dumb, get rid of it. These people know nothing. Robby, how can you nod your head at that? They don't know what these regulations, what has to do with safety, what has to do with taking care of the environment, what has to do with taking care of our oceans or our lands.
People doing the regulating?
Pardon?
Do the regulators
Yes, they
know?
do.
The regulators,
Why are you assuming that these people who work in these agencies know nothing?
I guess why are
are
we
you
assuming that
demonizing these
everyone
people
is-
as though they know nothing?
Well, I'm not
These
demonizing
are people
them.
who have had spectacular job performances, many of them, and are being cruelly fired. You're inept at your job, you're irresponsible, you don't know what you're doing, when they received spectacular job reviews. Why are we necessarily assuming that Musk is
I'm not talking about
correct?
the employees who are usually just following the orders given to them by people overseeing bureaucratic agencies. I'm not even talking about the people, but our country, the health of our citizenry is being stifled by excessive regulation. It is so hard to start a business. It is so hard to build a new house, to build homes.
That
the
balance is
cost
necessary.
of building a new home. This is one of the major issues for young people. Is why we were talking about intergenerational warfare the other day. It is harder than ever to buy a home because the housing supply is artificially constrained by regulation, Marianne, by regulation
In some
on every
cases,
aspect of the process.
You just said that our health is worse because of regulations.
Yes.
Our health is worse because lack of safety and health regulations. When it comes to buying a home and some of these economic barriers, you're absolutely right. You know, Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is liberal and conservative. This is supposed to be a both and here, not an either or, but neither of us should be happy about somebody with a hammer who doesn't respect this government, doesn't respect our democracy, and clearly knows nothing about a constitutional system. None of us should be excited about him taking that hammer to our government.
I think it's
and
a
to the way our
chainsaw,
government works.
not a hammer. I think it's a chainsaw.
Well, it is a chainsaw. Forgive me, Elon. Chainsaw. Even worse.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Next up on Rising, BlackRock struck a deal to buy ports in the Panama Canal. We'll discuss. Stay with us. If you follow the news, you've probably heard of a company called BlackRock. I know we've discussed it on Rising. It is the world's largest asset manager, controlling $11.5 trillion in assets last year. Many on the right have grown to dislike the investment firm for partaking in what's called ESG, or environmental social governance initiatives. Put simply, BlackRock was prioritizing investment in companies that meet certain ESG standards on things like climate change and diversity. Now that appears to be over.
Per the Wall Street Journal, BlackRock backed out of Net Zero Asset Managers in January. Net Zero Asset Managers is an initiative dedicated to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050.
In BlackRock's most recent annual report, they dropped references to DEI. For instance, the Wall Street Journal pointed out a stark difference. Reporter Jack Pitcher writes, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, in a 2021 letter to shareholders, said, quote, "We have a long-term strategy aimed at improving diversity, equity, and inclusion at BlackRock. To truly drive change, we must embed DEI into everything that we do." Compare that to their most recent report, which says, quote, "Delivering for the firm's clients requires attracting the best people from across the world. BlackRock is committed to creating an environment that supports top talent and fosters diverse perspectives to avoid groupthink." Well, that's much better.
There's been a lot of pressure since 2022 from red state attorneys general, House Republicans, and oil and gas lobbyists to stifle ESG efforts.
Other changes BlackRock has made include ending workforce representation goals, not requiring managers to interview a diverse set of candidates, and their credit facility is not lending money based on whether the borrowers meet diversity targets. BlackRock also made another major move. They stuck $23 billion deal with CK Hutchison, a Hong Kong-based conglomerate that gives BlackRock control over key parts of the Panama Canal. Here's Trump touting that move last night.
Further enhance our national security, my administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it. Just today, a large American company announced they are buying both ports around the Panama Canal and lots of other things having to do with the Panama Canal and a couple of other canals. The Panama Canal was built by Americans for Americans, not for others, but others could use it. But it was built at tremendous cost of American blood and treasure. 38,000 workers died building the Panama Canal.
Conservative filmmaker Robby wrote on X, BlackRock was one of the largest entities forcing DEI into corporations. Their leadership declared that they must embed DEI into everything. Larry Fink even admitted BlackRock was forcing behaviors of companies to change. Today, they're exiting DEI. We're winning. Musician Chris Lash, meanwhile, in reference to BlackRock acquiring Panama, the canal ports, wrote this, "MAGA has been against BlackRock. How is this a victory?" Chris Rossini, a senior fellow at the Ron Paul Institute, posted, "When they said the U.S. will take the Panama Canal, it turned out to be BlackRock. When they say the U.S. will get Ukraine's minerals, it will turn out to be who now?" All the while, the American people are led to believe that they're winning a prize that actually cost them $300 billion. So this is a very interesting topic. I think we'll have plenty of disagreement, although maybe some areas of disagreement. The way BlackRock, in my view, has operated to force businesses to comply with ESG and DEI mindsets is, I think, very bad, as they are now admitting. I think they mostly did those things as a form of PR, and this is where you might actually agree from your probably their sinister and bad kind of global capitalist hegemony. They're making you overlook that by saying, but look at our good DEI stuff, look at how diverse, look at how many black people we're employing, you can't yell at us.
Words in my mouth?
I thought that was what you were going to say.
Don't project onto me. There are separate issues for me here. First of all, the fact that Fink had been previously such a champion for the environment, to see him surrender that is very sad to me. I don't see why we're making social investment wrong. Social responsibility like it's a bad thing. And I think that if we ask, this is a basic issue.
Because it makes everything more expensive for us.
Oh, more expensive. Well, what about, see, this is how I feel. As an individual, I believe on the earth, God would have me try to do the right thing, not make money more important than doing the right thing. I think it's a perversion of the principles that should underlie our economy and our politics to make corporate profits always the bottom line as opposed to humanitarian and democratic principles. So I think there is such a thing as righteous profit. And I don't think we're going to make less money in the long run if we also steward well the earth on which we live. It's not going to be good for anybody economically when this economy, if the environment implodes, the economy will.
But it's not just a trade-off between the environment being cleaner, healthier, whatever, and profits. It's a trade-off between helping the environment and our material living standards. And asking people, I'm not talking about rich CEO type people, fine, they could sacrifice more, whatever, but for people to sacrifice, for people to live more difficult lives now to save the environment in the future, it's just never going to be a winning message. So we need, now I'm for protecting the environment, I'm for moving to cleaner sources of energy as it makes sense to do so, as you can still make those technologies as they become more profitable over time. Ending, like Europe should end its dependency on Russian gas and oil. That would be great. Move from oil to gas. I would say move to nuclear, which is very clean and very safe, which I know people on the left don't like, and we moved away from. And I think that's been very actually disastrous for both the environment and profits and having a more environmentally safe standards. But look, you can't just say like, oh yeah, we're gonna take away your access to really high functioning washing machines, or we're gonna take away your access to gas stoves. Like normal, ordinary working people are actually the ones who are the most annoyed by that, because rich people can buy fancier things that cost more and it doesn't matter to them. The higher environmental ESG standards are felt by people who don't have money to spare.
This is why being a business leader is an art and not just a science. A first principle of the United States for the government itself is to be a broker between individual liberty, which includes financial liberty, economic liberty, and a concern for the common good. Sure. And I think a righteous CEO, I think a responsible business leader is one who is obviously seeking to make a profit, obviously to increase value for your stockholders, but realizes that there are other stakeholders as well. And that includes the people who breathe the air on this planet. That includes our grandchildren. So I don't think it has to be an either or, and I think America is righteous when we're at a big both and. Can we move on to Panama now?
Go ahead.
Okay, now, last night the president says, it's like he's going around threatening countries, not just Canada. He says about Panama, he says, we're going to take the Panama Canal one way or the other, we're going to take it. No, excuse me, because right now, whether you agree with what happened before, in the 70s I think it was, or not, it doesn't belong to us right now. Now, one of the problems that the president has with all this has to do with China. So you think the head of Panama wasn't on the phone with the Chinese this morning? We are not thinking at all about the repercussions of some of this. He's like a bull in the china shop. And
no, but I think this move was aimed very directly at curbing the Chinese influence. I agree with you. Well, we should not seek to conquer Panama or Greenland or Canada. It's ridiculous. I don't actually think it's being contemplated. We don't want to have more military engagement anywhere, particularly.
But what about his line?
But we do want to counter the Chinese influence. I don't know what that means. I hope that means greater economic engagement with the relevant stakeholders in Greenland, Panama, etc., to have a better and more prosperous trade and economic relationship on our terms.
This is an important issue for those of us who see things a little differently. I'm told all the time by conservative friends, by Trump voter friends and so forth, oh, Marianne, he doesn't mean that. He doesn't mean that. The more time goes on, the more some of these crazy things he says, oh, he does mean. So when the president stood up last night and he said, we're going to get it, one way or the other, we're going to get it. The president's behavior at this point.
You don't think that just means the deal that he wants he's going to get?
Listen,
he's getting with Zelensky after all?
I think the fact that he's a tough negotiator at times, I think all of us are like, yeah, if we are being treated unfairly by Panama in terms of Chinese ships, et cetera, I'm okay with that. That's very different than saying we're going to get it back one way or the other. Right. And I think that we have every reason as Americans to expect far more sobriety, far more responsibility, and far less ineptitude on the part of our president.
One last thought on the Blackrock story. You know, when he says we're not going to do DEI, we want to just hire the best and brightest people and have diverse perspectives, I think 60–70% of Americans agree with that. What's wrong with that?
Well, you know, on the DEI, I think on the DEI, if they feel that there's coming back to the center in terms of the way companies operate, it's not for me to say because it's a private company. In terms of saying to anybody who values diversity, inclusion, who values the idea that we must include people who have been historically wronged in the way we function as a society, number one, I'm all for that. Number two, I don't like the idea of the government saying, this is what this is not how I should see things. Even like this woke stuff.
Well, I agree with that.
Even this woke stuff. All right, some of it makes me roll my eyes as well. But that's not the point. The government, people, if they want to look at it that way, they get to look at it that way. I get to look at things my way. You get to look at things your way. And I would never say to you, even though I think you're wrong most of the time and you think I'm wrong most of the time, I would never say to you, and I sure as hell don't think the government should be telling you that your way of thinking should die now.
I don't think you're wrong about that at all.
Thank you. Okay, we agree on that one.
All right, where do things stand with the Ukraine issue? We're going to speak to Michael Shellenberger, one of our favorite guests on Rising, about that. Stay tuned. After President Trump demanded an apology and a thank you from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader seems to be falling in line. In a post on X yesterday, Zelensky did express regret over the heated Oval Office spectacle. He wrote, quote, "None of us wants an endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts." Now, per the Wall Street Journal, President Trump suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine, which is expected to cripple its ability to target Russian forces. In his address to a joint session of Congress on Tuesday, Trump reaffirmed that Russia wants peace too. Take a look.
We've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? It's time to stop this madness. It's time to halt the killing. It's time to end this senseless war. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides.
Journalist Michael Shellenberger has been vocal about the U.S.-Ukraine relationship, writing recently on X, quote, "Ukraine and Europe don't respect us. They look down on us. America never had any obligation to protect Ukraine. And now we're asking, why should we continue to spend our money and put our lives on the line to protect Europe?"
Joining us now to discuss his point of view is the founder and author of Public, independent Substack account that is anything but mainstream. Welcome back to Rising, Michael.
Good to be with you, Robby.
Always good to talk to you, and you know, I think you and I are mostly similar minds here. It's just so important to me, and so important for the sake of the Ukrainian people, to get a peace deal. You know, there's a lot of some of the criticism of Zelensky that I hear on the right. I don't really care how he dresses in the Oval Office. I don't even care necessarily that he apologizes or whatever it is. But we have to get a peace deal in place because the reality is Ukraine is not going to drive Russia from the conflict. And I think, like you, because I know you've done so much reporting on the European Union's activities, which don't meet my standards for reaffirming basic commitments to free speech and interfering with our American tech companies that have different principles, I think there is a lack of appreciation for America, particularly with the European Union more broadly, that just necessitates a resetting of this whole arrangement, this whole relationship.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that there was so much in that interaction in the Oval Office that inspired so much commentary, rightly so. I mean, part of it is this basic issue of respect. I think that a lot of us who go to Europe and have interactions with the Europeans, there's just a kind of sense that really there's not the respect there. There might have been after World War II, but really there's just a way in which Europeans think they're better than Americans. They kind of look down on Americans, maybe resent us. Some have even some contempt in cases. Certainly some tourists have felt that way, but just in the broader relationship. And while that may seem like petty or just an ego thing, respect is essential. I mean, it's a shortcut to knowing that you can trust somebody. So when you don't feel that mutual respect, and I don't think Zelensky, and I agree with you, it's not about the clothes. It was the sort of wanting to have an argument, wanting to interrupt, and then sort of dismissing what appears to be a genuine effort to have peace talks as just completely unworkable. And it's not like his concerns are not warranted. They are warranted, but it just didn't really feel like we were getting a lot of sincerity. And then for me, it just kind of raises larger questions about, hey, it's been 80 years that we've had this agreement essentially to protect Europe, even in a nuclear conflict with Russia. Is it time for Europe to really provide its own security? And I think we have also started to see France and England at least moving in that direction.
It's interesting with both of you. First of all, Robby, when you say this business is about, that J.D. Vance didn't like a suppression of free speech on the part of the Europeans, let me tell you about Vladimir Putin, his suppression of free speech. If you say what he doesn't like, he'll throw you in prison or even kill you. That's number one. Now, as far as the fact that Europeans don't respect us, I've been in Europe a lot. You're right. Sometimes they insult you. They think we're so stupid that we don't know. But I'm not 12 years old, so that's not going to factor into my geopolitical calculations. So what you just said, Michael, about the arms race, that's the point. The United States has been saying for all these years to European countries, now France has nukes and England has nukes, but the rest of the European continent has been told you don't have to do that because we will be your nuclear umbrella. Excuse me, Michael, this could start, if Europe feels, as clearly they do, that America switched sides. We're going with the bad guys now. We're going with the authoritarians now. We're siding with Russia. This could actually initiate an arms race among Europeans. This is dangerous. This is not about whether or not on a personality level they treat us in a way that we don't like. This is about the geopolitical ecosystem of this planet, which has been carefully put into place. And by the way, let's not forget that the nuclear safety arm of the Energy Department is one of the things Musk has already gotten rid of. So we have to be far more sober and adult about this and what this can do. The one who is risking a World War III scenario here is not Zelensky.
But they also
risking a World War III scenario here is Donald Trump.
But they're also, they're addicted. Well, I'll let you take this, Michael. But they're addicted to Russian energy production, right? And they're not. It's not just that they're mean to us. It's just that they're two-faced about this whole arrangement. But go ahead, Michael.
Well, I mean, I certainly agree that the United States holds a huge amount of responsibility and maybe even blame for the current situation. I mean, under Republican and Democratic presidents, there was an aggressive push to expand NATO, and most political scientists today believe that was one of the factors, not the only one, certainly, in Russian aggression. And look, yeah, I mean, in terms of nuclear, I mean, you're right. UK and France have a nuclear deterrent. I don't think that anybody thinks that Denmark needs to have a nuclear deterrent. It's a nuclear shield is the idea, and that the UK and France are right now openly talking about providing to Germany. I'm not even saying Germany needs a nuclear weapon. The Germans might believe that at some point. Doesn't look like they do now, but I think that and the nuclear revolution makes it so that a small country like North Korea can prevent itself from being invaded. Europe has that nuclear deterrent now. I think it's a process of transition. I don't think we should be abandoning NATO abruptly, certainly not like Biden abandoned Afghanistan, but I think some sort of an orderly shifting of the military responsibility for self-protection needs to happen to Europe. I think that the resolution of the Ukraine conflict has to happen in that context. And I don't see it. It's hard to see ways that it happens without some amount of tragedy. And I don't know how you do it exactly. Putin, I'm not sure he'll be satisfied with what he takes, but I know for certain that the American people are not signed up for another 10-year commitment in some sort of a war in Ukraine with another nuclear-armed nation.
And it's going to take engagement with Russia to figure out. That was one of the most striking facts to me, is that the Biden administration did not even talk to Putin for 3 years, for most of his entire presidency, where, you know, and I'm under no illusions, I say this every day we talk about this subject, that Putin is a thug and an authoritarian and illegally initiated this war. I'm not shifting the blame to Ukraine or Zelensky for that, but we are in the situation where thousands, hundreds of thousands have died, and the war could continue until even more people die because Russia's willing to throw more bodies into it, and that's unconscionable, but it's just a fact. So how do we deal with these facts? Could we engage with Russia in a way that actually causes us all to stand down and lower our nuclear stockpiling? Trump actually mentioned that in recent remarks. I think that would be great, don't you?
Well, I think, you know, I agree with what Michael said when you were talking about the fact that we were aggressive about the expansion of NATO. I agree with that. However, I think that there's an underestimation here of the legitimate fear and concern that the Europeans feel about Putin, particularly given the fact that the United States is getting so cozy with him. When we talk about having a deal, all three of us, and most Americans, of course we want this thing to end. But this conversation about talking to Putin, where everybody talks about what a tough negotiator Donald Trump is. Well, where's the tough negotiation with Vladimir Putin? That's all I'm saying. And what you were saying, the nuclear experts right now, Michael, are saying that no, they do not, Europeans, many Europeans, including countries like Denmark, the Baltics, Moldova, so many who are so afraid right now, they do not see the nuclear capacity of France and England as enough to be a deterrent should we really go all the way into the arms of the Russians.
Yeah, I mean, on the latter point, I'm not sure why. I mean, it's important to remember that after World War II, the United States government tried to stop Britain and France from getting a nuclear deterrent, and both countries insisted, you know, actually, we will take that nuclear deterrent. But the French model is the force de frappe, which is the counterstrike model, meaning that they don't have enough nuclear weapons to like win a nuclear war with Russia, as though a nuclear war is something that could be won in the first place. But that is sort of the posture of the United States. The French nuclear deterrent is enough to be able to knock out the capital cities of anybody who were to invade France. In other words, France is able to obliterate Moscow if Moscow were to invade France. And so actually, if you did have a nuclear umbrella that covered Germany, France would be able to use that nuclear deterrent against Russia. Now, as soon as you play that scenario forward, you have to wonder whether the Germans and all of their great pride are going to want to be the little brother to France, who frankly right now, France, despite being a smaller economy than Germany, is the dominant power in Europe, in my view, because it does have a nuclear deterrent, making it a leader in terms of military security, you know. But as for, you know, whether you're sort of accusing Trump of being too soft on Russia, the guy's a negotiator. I think we've all sort of underestimated Trump in his ability to get his way. And I think the thing that's going for Trump in terms of legitimacy is that Putin invaded on Biden's watch, not on Trump's watch. And on Biden's watch, as Robby pointed out, the United States refused to talk to Russia and only badmouthed him. So if badmouthing Putin worked, we would have seen a ceasefire under Biden.
It's a great point. We got to leave it there. Unfortunately, wish I could talk to you longer. Michael Shellenberger, my friend, thank you so much for joining Rising today.
Thank you, Michael.
Great to be with you.
Up next, Biden's former spokesperson has words for Trump. Stay tuned. Remember Karine Jean-Pierre, President Biden's former press secretary who helped cover for him and mislead the American people on his cognitive decline? Well, she was on The View taking a swipe at the Trump administration for what she calls an assault on free speech. Let's watch.
If you look at the Associated Press, they are the oldest wire in the press briefing room. And you think about journalists, you think about the reason they're in the press briefing room, you think about the reason they're in the pool. It's called the protective pool. There are 13 members of the pool. I'll try not to get too wonky here. And their job is to provide unbiased information to the American people, because the American people deserve that. And when the White House press team decides to step in and override the White House Correspondents Association, who they have the job of doing that, then what we're looking at is state TV. Yep. What we're looking at is what Russia is doing. What we're looking at is what North Korea is doing. And we are doing that, they are attacking the fiber of the freedom of the press. They are destroying it because they want to be covered in a friendly way. Yeah. And look, I was in that position for 2.5 years. It is an exercise, what we did in the press briefing room, what the president did when he took questions from the press, it is an exercise of democracy.
It got heated. KJP and The View company host Alyssa Farah-Griffin got into it. Let's watch.
Do you believe that Joe Biden would have won if he had stayed in? And a follow-up to that, do you think Kamala Harris would have had a better shot had she had more time?
So look, I was asked a question, I answered it honestly, and how I felt at the moment. I was the one that was going to the podium almost every day after that happened, and it was shocking what I saw. But I also, I can't speculate, right? I don't know what would have happened. And anybody who says they do, they don't really know. And so I don't want to go to rehatch the past. I don't think that's a good idea. Right now, again, 5-alarm fire, we need to move with strategy, with focus, and the Democratic Party needs to actually answer those questions that I put forth. Who are we and what are we fighting for? And how do we meet the moment?
Press secretary, you were also an assistant to the president, so that meant you were able to interact with the campaign off time.
Actually, I could not I had a special kind of role as the press secretary. I did not interact with the campaign.
So you had no, as a commissioned officer,
I could not.
So you had no insight into the polling that showed he would have lost every swing
I
state?
did not
That
because
ship has sailed.
Well, it does matter, though.
Okay, here's what's going to happen. Hold on. We're going to take a break because you see this conversation getting going.
That was incredible. Alyssa Farah-Griffin was doing a good job of really trying to dial down it, but we know, KJP, you were around Biden and had to be seeing how he was functioning at this point, and you were clearly misleading people about it, and then Whoopi goes, oop, commercial break.
Well, I have
not good, Whoopi.
Yeah, I have personal experience here. Right after I announced for the presidency, KJP came onto the press podium the week after to mock me about crystal balls and say the president is not afraid of her, to make me sound like a silly person. So the idea that she gives unbiased information and no propaganda is absurd. Also, the rest of the ladies on The View who routinely throughout the campaign, when I was running in the primary, would speak mockingly, Sunny Hostin absolutely lying about my experience with AIDS patients. Obviously, they were just reading DNC points. That kind of Democrat is one of the big reasons why we lost.
Yes, indeed. And making a clear break with that version of the Democratic Party seems like a no-brainer. You know, at least you could say when Bill Clinton left office, when Barack Obama left office, they were broadly speaking popular. They were popular among Democrats, and you know their approval ratings were higher than Biden and Trump leaving office, certainly. Biden approval rating so low leaving office. Kamala Harris rejected. And I think Kamala Harris did a lot wrong in the course of her campaign, but she did inherit the campaign at the last minute, and she inherited the Biden people, the Biden team, people who were unwilling to criticize the guy who just stopped being their boss 5 seconds ago. Those people need to stop being listened to. They've been but they've moved from the commanding heights of the Democratic Party into media positions. You know, Joy Reid got replaced by Simone Sanders, someone who's even more defensive of Harris and Biden than Joy Reid is, if that's even possible.
What happened here was the DNC, the head elite establishment corporatist wing, which they certainly represent, decided they felt, in their supreme wisdom, that Trump was such a danger and such a threat to democracy that they had the role of suppressing democracy in the Democratic Party. If they had not peripheralized, de-amplified, and smeared the president's his opponents, such as myself. And also when you were talking about Kamala Harris inheriting it, we had time. Just as I kept saying, the president should debate me, so should Kamala have. So you're right. You and I agree on this one. These people need to step aside and let the new voices of the Democratic Party be heard. We have them. But those people suppressed them, kept the lid on, and would do so now if we allow them to.
And we're wrong. And they said that was necessary in order to defeat Trump.
That's the point.
They lost.
Wrong, and even now won't admit it.
Well, and she won't admit that she didn't know about but she's like, I don't know what would have happened if Biden remained the nominee. He would have lost by an even greater tighter margin is what was going to happen.
But there were alternatives, and they made sure that those alternatives that nobody
they didn't consider alternatives. There was at no point in time were they going to do alternatives. I mean, Biden coronated Kamala out the door, said, "I'm stepping aside, and by the way, it's going to be Kamala now." Nancy Pelosi said, "Yep, sounds good." Everybody kicked into high gear and said, "Yep," and then said, "Oh, but you could have dissented at some point." Marianne, you could have wandered down there and,
you know This is interesting. The Republicans are actually, the Republicans have the more elitist policies, but a strangely more egalitarian relationship with their own constituency.
Yes.
The
Finally,
Democrats
that was
have
not
the
always
more,
the case, but now
well,
it is.
but the Democrats have the more egalitarian policies, but a strangely elitist relationship with its own constituency. The Republicans will look at someone like Vivek Ramaswamy. He's never served in office and said, "You have some good ideas, come on in." The Democratic elite will look at someone like myself as though I had no life. There is no level of expertise except their level of clubbishness and expertise. They see only that as qualified. They think qualified means qualified to perpetuate the machinery that they're already running and losing with. The Democratic Party is going to have to open up the windows, open up the doors. There's some new music. Sometimes I feel like the old-fashioned Democratic Party is intentionally shrinking its base. Let the rest of us in, guys. We'll have a much greater chance of
Republican elites also tried to give people some option other than Trump. They wanted to move away from Trump and said, "All right, let's have a competitive process." That Trump won, and because the people, not the elites. The elites didn't shove Trump on the people again.
Right.
The elites tried to say, "Is there anybody else? Anybody? Ron DeSantis? Anybody?" And the people said, "We demand Trump again. We demand Trump even more, even harder now, please."
And the press went along with that. Their partners, MSNBC, CNN that had the CNN town halls for all the Republicans, but wouldn't have them for Robby or me, even when our polling numbers were even higher than some of them. Very different than in 2020. So we need to call you guys on it, because hopefully you won't make that same mistake in 2028. Otherwise, as Jefferson would say, tremble for my country.
All right, that does it for us today on Rising. Thanks so much for watching us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.